From KBIA and the New Territory with PRX, this is Rivertown, a celebration of the Missouri River and how it shapes the people and places it flows through. I'm Tina Casagrande-Foss, and this is Episode 3, Protecting Our Water. We keep learning new things as we make this podcast. Just a few weeks ago, our project manager, Jessica Von Martin, noticed her water was tasting a little funny. A couple days went by, and she called her water company, and they said, oh, yeah, with all the winter road salt running off into our streams, it does sort of affect the flavor. But don't worry, it's safe to drink. That was when Jessica learned that surface water from the Missouri River supplies half the drinking water for Missourians, including her. She's still a little skeptical about the flavor. In this episode of Rivertown, we're going to meet Rivertown's youngest upstanding citizens, learn what people are doing to protect our waterways from pollution, and what's happening in Missouri water policy right now.
What's your favorite thing about the Missouri River?
My favorite thing about the Missouri River is cruising on the water because it's very cool and I just like the water.
Last spring, Rivertown reporters Ava Niels and Ashley Cochrane met some elementary school students out at Cooper's Landing, just outside Columbia. They were there on a field trip with Missouri River Relief. We heard a little bit about this organization in our last episode. They host the Race to the Dome paddle race. And as a nonprofit dedicated to the exploration, enjoyment, restoration, and care of the Missouri River, they also run educational events, like this one.
We're going to be quiet for an entire minute. So use your eagle eyes, your owl ears, experience everything we're sensing on the river for an entire minute.
That was a River Relief volunteer teaching Columbia Public School fourth graders how to be scientists. The first step is observing, and then comes asking questions.
You guys have done an exceptional job of being quiet. Share with me some of the things you guys were seeing and hearing. Yeah.
I saw an airplane. Yeah.
Really, what a privilege to show the next generation the river up close. This is so much cooler than reading students a book or showing them a video. Here's River Relief's Barney Combs.
The first thing they get to do is go on a boat ride, so they get to kind of act like scientists and do investigative thinking while they're out on the river. They can ask any kind of question they want. For many of them, they've never been on a boat ride in their lives. And to be able to go out on the river, they can touch the river, they can see it. Occasionally a fish may jump up and they may see that. So they get a real chance to be out in nature and actually do critical thinking. They don't know they're doing that at this age, I don't think, for most of them. But they're developing those skills. We're asking, like, I wonder, how deep is the river? Or how many fish are in the river?
Barney says helping students ask questions about the river gets them interested in it, which is the first step toward caring about it. That's really what River Relief is hoping to do, says Michael DeLeon, the operations manager at Cooper's Landing. He told reporter Ashley Cochrane that this event is all about inspiring these students to care enough about the Missouri River that they'll want to protect it.
You'd be surprised, with the Missouri River being so close to Columbia, how many kids have never been out here before. And these fourth graders come out here, they get an introduction to the river. These are the future of River Relief. These are the kids who are going to be working for River Relief, in the next 15, 20 years. They're going to be the ones who are basically keeping the river clean. So I just think it's important to introduce them to what the Missouri River is and all the things that you can get from the Missouri River and all the things that it provides.
Have you had a favorite moment that you've witnessed so far recently of maybe a kid having an aha moment? Or
My favorite moment is when the kids get on the boat and they call it river air conditioning. So basically, they start the boat, they'll stop it, and then they'll just go really fast. Boom, and you'll hear all the kids, they just scream. It's so loud, it's awesome. So it's almost like a river roller coaster for them, but yeah, they really like that. I wish it happened more often, but I think fourth grade is a good age for them to come out here and just, they're a little bit more aware of what's going on around them. So they don't get lost in the explanation of all these things. You know, they see all the different fish, all the different animals you can find in the Missouri River. So I just think it's a great program, and like I said, it's introduces them to the river, something that's so close, but sometimes seems kind of far away.
Missouri River Relief's education efforts aren't just for kids.
It's a beautiful day on the river.
Remember Roger McBride? He's the artist who captains the Kansas City Lady, taking musicians on sunset cruises downtown. Well, throughout his years on the river, he's noticed a lot of trash and grime.
I had been coming out here, but I would always go by the nasty spots, you know, the backwash of Flotsam. Yeah, I'm like, I want to show you the other stuff. I don't want to show you that.
One day, Roger's son took him to a cleanup event hosted by Missouri River Relief. Along with the other volunteers, Roger got right up in those nasty spots he had always avoided.
Well, they had me come down and start doing a cleanup with them, and I put us in the middle of it, and I'm scooping this out, and I reached down into it, and I just squeezed my hand and I pulled back up, and I mean I reached doing a good 3.5 feet down through the floty plastic and funk, and when I pulled my hand up, I pulled up a handful of styrofoam pellets that broke down. And that really was like this gut punch at just how bad. I mean, I knew it was bad, but that it was that I had to take my part.
Styrofoam, like Roger found that day, takes a long time to break down. It can become a harmful snack for fish and other animals. And as it degrades, it can leach chemicals into the water. And that's just one example of what the thousands of River Relief volunteers remove from the water and its banks. Just this one organization has cleaned up 1,000 tons of trash since 2001. We're talking tires, electronics, plastic barrels and tubs, grills, coolers, chairs, buoys and barrels, doll heads and duck decoys, action figures, flip-flops, and of course, lots and lots of cigarette butts, bottles, and other food packaging. Then the fish, birds, and other species who call the river home eat this stuff, get tangled up in it, and live in and drink water that's been contaminated by it. And remember, so do we. Because microplastics are not regulated by the EPA, we don't know how they may be trickling through our filtration systems and into our taps. Seeing that pile of broken down styrofoam floating on the river he loves was enough to really gross Roger out. But you've met Roger. You know he's a man of action. So dude got mobilized. He started doing river cleanups whenever he could with both Missouri River Relief and a local Missouri stream team. And he started learning more about how so much trash winds up in the river.
Everything goes downhill to the river, then goes downstream. And that's a fact. And ultimately, the river, for the longest time, was a sewage pit. You know, people used it to dump everything they wanted to just go away. You know, these banks, this used to be the city dump. Just down past the Choteau Bridge, you know, the city dump was right on the edge of the river and had been, they would burn everything, and it destroyed the ecosystem for the longest time.
Roger's right. For many years, the U.S. government didn't regulate water pollution. Factories, cities, and citizens could dump chemicals, trash, or sewage directly into rivers, even if that meant communities downstream wound up with dirty water.
You know, I get asked that question frequently of like, well, you know, is our water getting better or worse compared to, you know, several decades ago? And the answer is it depends.
Mary Kohler is the executive director of Stream Teams United. Just a quick background. Missouri Stream Team is a statewide working partnership of citizens who are concerned about Missouri streams, and it's been around since 1988. River Relief is technically a stream team, and so are hundreds of family groups, municipalities, and other organizations. Some examples of stream team programs include litter pickups, water quality monitoring, tree planting, and storm drain stenciling. Those are co-facilitated by the Missouri Departments of Conservation and Natural Resources, while Mary at Stream Teams United works on education, stewardship, and advocacy. Mary is going to help us learn about what's happening with water policy in Missouri today. So, water nerds, listen up.
When the Clean Water Act came around in 1972, that brought a lot of additional protections as far as treating waste that's coming out of towns, So a lot of times your stream may have been impacted by what we call a point source.
Ready for some vocab lessons? Point sources are a single identifiable source of pollution. Think of the dump Roger mentioned in Kansas City, or sewage treatment plants, oil refineries, paper and pulp mills, anywhere pollution originated that you can identify.
Now those point sources are regulated, and we tend to have more pollution that comes from these non-point sources.
Non-point source pollution occurs when rain or snow runs off a large area and carries pollutants from many sources into our waterways. An example could be an urban area's collective pet waste, lawn chemicals, motor oil, and a bunch of construction sites. Or the agricultural pesticides and fertilizers that different farms use on their land. Non-point pollution is hard for the Federal Clean Water Act to regulate. In fact, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources says over 85% of our impaired rivers and streams are impaired by non-point source pollution. And Mary says, in the last few years, Missouri laws have gotten worse at protecting against it.
In 2016, we saw legislation that allowed for a change in the makeup of the Clean Water Commission that essentially reduced the representation of the general public.
A few years later, the state legislature made it harder for the agriculture industry to be prosecuted for hazardous runoff into nearby water sources.
In 2018, there was some legislation that exempted agricultural stormwater runoff from that. In 2019, Senate Bill 391 passed, and what that did was it basically said that local counties could not have any ordinances that were more strict than state law as it relates to agriculture.
Senate Bill 391 was in 2019 and has a huge impact on potential pollution from concentrated animal feeding operations, also known as CAFOs. These large-scale agricultural operations house thousands of farm animals like cows or pigs or chickens, all in one place. And the animal waste found there can contain disease-causing pathogens, plus any residual hormones or pharmaceuticals. This waste often remains untreated and can mix into stormwater and find its way into freshwater systems like rivers and streams. Before the bill, a number of Missouri counties had ordinances that regulated how CAFOs manage their waste. But now?
Basically, the local counties don't have any say in whether or not these facilities have additional restrictions.
Some Missouri citizens were not happy about that. After Senate Bill 391 was signed into law, Cooper County and residents in Callaway County sued the state to block it. The case wound up before the Missouri Supreme Court. In 2023, the court unanimously upheld the law. Mary believes this is already having a negative impact on water quality across the state.
What it's done is set up an environment where there could be less accountability, okay? And it's also set up an environment where, like we see, there's an out-of-state company, possibly more out-of-state companies that are looking at Missouri's regulations saying, okay, this is an inviting place to bring our wastewater. So I think you have to ask ourselves, is that the type of scenario that we want to promote?
The answer for Stream Teams United is no, which is why Mary says one of the most important parts of her job is education and building awareness of how all of our actions contribute to healthy or unhealthy water in our communities and beyond.
I think one thing, and I've been working in the state of Missouri in water for 18 years now, we still have a general unawareness as a public about what a watershed is and how our actions that we do daily may positively or negatively affect downstream waters.
In case you're wondering what a watershed is, it's basically a term to describe an area of land that drains water into the same lake, river, or sea. In Missouri, all of us live in the Mississippi River watershed, meaning eventually the water we use will end up in the Mississippi River. From there, it travels downstream into the Gulf of Mexico. So when a Missouri county is unable to regulate CAFO runoff, that can wind up contributing to toxic algae blooms all the way off the southern coast of the United States.
Every person on planet Earth lives in a watershed, and we all make choices, right? So there's something we can do. We can choose to make positive choices. We can choose to make choices that are not so great for downstream waters.
That's why keeping track of what's happening in our water locally is so important. So, in addition to organizing trash cleanups, stream teams also monitor water quality in streams and rivers across the state. Volunteers can apply for testing kits and training from stream teams. Then they go out and take water samples, watch stream flow, and count macroinvertebrates. They send their data to a central database monitored by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. Being part of a statewide, mostly volunteer effort to help keep Missouri water clean helps Mary feel hopeful.
Missourians care, and we're starting to hear people get really vocal about this. And when we think about Missouri, we are just like absolutely blessed with fresh water resources in this state. So we've kind of been a little bit spoiled by both the quantity and quality of our water here in Missouri, but we need to also realize like what an absolute treasure it is. And we cannot allow for it to be degraded because it's much easier to protect our water than to try to restore something that's been degraded.
Nothing is worse than seeing trash go up and down the river.
This is Christopher Kennedy, out on his boat on the Missouri River. Chris is a fisheries biologist, and until this year was the Diversity and Equity Chair for the Missouri Department of Conservation. He's been working on Missouri rivers for over 25 years and been enjoying the river recreationally all of his life. He comes from a long line of river racers. Chris admits that at different points in his career, he has gotten really down about river pollution.
Back when I was a young biologist, I was feeling like, man, the river is really in bad shape. And I was thinking about it just in my time frame. And I almost felt like it was getting worse than getting better. And I was at they call it Cape Rock. It's an overlook at Cape Girardeau, and it overlooks the river. And there was this 80-year-old man. He was standing out there on the water, on the overlook. And I asked him, I said, so is the river better now than it was when you were younger, when you were my age? And he kind of chuckled. And he said, son, I can remember when you could set the river on fire, when it was nothing to see raw sewage constantly going down the river. And so, you know, when we think about whether things are getting better or worse, it's important to look at it generationally because things happen slow. And in my little lifetime, I may think that things are getting worse, but they're actually getting better.
I love hearing Chris talk about the long view and alternative ways of seeing water. I think sometimes people become a little myopic, maybe a little too black and white. Even something like flooding gets cast as an entirely bad thing. But as Chris explains it, it's part of a natural cycle.
And you definitely don't want to say it when it's flooding, but flooding is a good thing. And we never talk about it being a good thing, and I understand because it can be somewhat disrespectful. Usually when it's flooding, homes are being demolished, people are being misplaced. It's not a time to talk about the benefits or the ecological benefits of flooding, you know, when people are losing their lives as they know it. But when the flood comes up, you know it's real muddy, right? A lot of sediment in the water. Well, when it goes in the floodplain, the speed of that water does what? It slows down. When it slows down, contaminants, soil falls out, clean water comes out of a floodplain when it gets done flooding. It helps purify that water. It percolates through the soil, which adds to that filtration.
Wow. And I'm sure there's way more that happens with flooding.
That's Rivertown producer Tadeo Ruiz.
Is it a matter of none of us have been asking what's the good side of flooding, or is it just not mainstream that people...
Scientists know it. Fourth graders know it when you teach them the water cycle. But somewhere along the line, we forget about the fact that this water that we depend on, that our planet depends on, is cycling from the river, through the soil, through the trees, in the atmosphere. So somewhere along the line, we forget about those fourth grade lessons, the simple lessons about how water moves, how it benefits us, and we become more consumed with moving commerce and doing it as effectively and as cheaply as we can.
Like Mary, Chris says education is key to helping keep our rivers clean and healthy. If more people are aware of the benefits of flooding, for example, they can call for water policies that will encourage flooding in safe areas rather than in our cities. Chris also told Tadeo that when confronting a problem as big and seemingly endless as pollution, he thinks it's important to keep a positive attitude.
It's hard to do that if you're plugging garbage in your mind every day. But if you want to focus on gloom and doom, there's plenty of it, and it's enough of it on social media. It's one of the worst traits of human beings. We have a tendency to point it out. But you don't have to live that way. You don't have to think that way. You don't have to exist in that vibration.
And I'm assuming the river helps a lot with that?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like a refresher?
I can't get dark out here, man. How can you be dark out here? It's hard to have hatred out here. And you know, mostly all the people I met on the water, and most of which didn't look like me. But it would appear to me that most people that are enjoying the outdoors and enjoying the water and recreating on it are very, very positive people and accepting.
So this is your saltine cracker, in a way. And the reason I say that is whenever you go to food tastings, you have to eat a saltine cracker in between each meal you have because it cleanses your palate and you're starting over, in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I never thought about that analogy, but yeah, absolutely. This is my saltine cracker.
Next time,
if you're out here on the river, you're definitely in a spiritual place. You can kind of feel that now, right?
we're going to learn more about the spiritual connections people have with the river. That episode is out next Friday. Check out our website at columbiamissourian.com/rivertown and see more Missouri River stories from Rivertown and beyond at newterritorymag.com/rivertown.
It's got to be. There's a river raging between you and me. I'm sitting on the porch watching that river.
Rivertown was reported by Tadeo Ruiz, Ailing Lee, Ellie Lynn, Kaylin Hellier, Olivia Mizell, and Kiana Fernandez. Ava Niels and Ashley Cochran also contributed reporting for this episode, and it was their first time doing audio reporting. Abigail Keel is our producer and editor. Jessica Von Martin is our project manager. Music for Rivertown comes from Gloria Atun and Jason Shaw via the Free Music Archive Creative Commons license. Our audience teams and our photo teams are led by Professor Kara Edgerson and Professor Brian Kratzer at the Missouri News Network. Special thanks to the Mississippi River Basin Ag and Water Desk. Rivertown is a collaborative project from KBIA, the Missouri School of Journalism's Missouri News Network, and the New Territory magazine. Executive producers of Rivertown are Janet Saidi and me, Tina Casagran Foss, in partnership with PRX.